Hollis, who died in February at the age of 47, had lethal amounts of cocaine, fentanyl, and alcohol in his system when he died. Good afternoon, and welcome back to the X-Life podcast. This is another Unfiltered episode, and my name is Christine, and I am your host today. I am here today talking about another somber subject, and it's a follow-up recording or a prequel, if you will, to my Dave Hollis episode. Just under a week ago, news came out that identified his cause of death, and I'm going to read that to you now. Hollis, who died in February at the age of 47, had lethal amounts of cocaine, fentanyl, and alcohol in his system when he died. So I'm here to talk about I don't want to have the other episode out there without acknowledging this information, but I also want to use this as you are not alone in how you process it. Meaning that when I first heard this, having been his friend and having learned from him for so many years, I was kind of in shock, quite frankly. It was public knowledge that I discussed before in the other episode. It was public knowledge that he had issues with alcohol and was in rehab in the early part of 2022. And we were all at this seminar, this conference last April, so a year ago. He was very open, honest, vulnerable, and still dealing with the rehab. But, and this is where you just don't know what's going on in people's lives comes in. You think that based on what you see and based on what people show you, that he's successfully navigating rehab, and that because he's been vulnerable and discussed everything, at least you think it's everything, he's opened up, that you feel like he's told you everything. So when it's someone that you respect so much, you've learned so much from, and you consider a friend and just a wonderful person, you get this information and you stutter for a second, like you lose a step thinking, did I really know this person? Did my thoughts of him, did that change? How do I feel about this, right? Like, what to do? So yes, I was in a little bit of shock just because I think everyone has preconceived notions of what especially is acceptable addictions for certain people, right? And my perception, everyone's perceptions are different. So I am in no way projecting onto anyone else. But my perception is that he's white collar, grew up in the church, dealt with a lot of stress. Alcohol is a legal substance, and it makes sense that the next level for dealing with something could be the alcohol, right? Like, there's a good bit of people that have used alcohol to deal with things, and not everyone has an addiction issue, but it's very commonplace. Growing up for me, it was very normal to see my dad relax with a few beers, watching a game or whatnot after a long day at work. So that is normal from my perspective and my history. And I, of course, knew friends that back in where are we? The 80s, cocaine was the thing, like a next level drug. But I always knew it was dangerous just from my personal experiences with friends. And also from, those those after school specials, right? Where um, people are sniffing cocaine or whatever, and it was like a warning, like, hey, if you do this, your nose membranes are going to thin, you're going to have nosebleeds. It just wasn't my thing, but I did know people that did it, right? But this, I think that was a long time ago. So then you fast forward and you see, like, it's a big thing in the party scene. You watch those Dateline 2020 episodes, and it's a party thing, right? Cocaine is a party drug. But it seems to be more prevalent in younger generations, right? So I go into getting this news with my history, my preconceived notions. And for a while, I don't know how to feel. Like, does this change how I feel about Dave? Does it change the kind of person that he was or who I thought he was? And no. The bottom line is no. It took me a few days to process, but it was wonderful to come to the conclusion that he is human. He was human and flawed, just like the rest of us. So if you consider your worst times, your worst self, your worst behavior, your worst activity, and would you put that out there? Would you put that out there for all to see? And perhaps he felt only comfortable enough to share what was acceptable, right? Like, because I just mentioned something about, okay, alcohol seems to be commonplace, seems to be acceptable. So maybe he knew that. Maybe within himself and within his circle of friends and close family, this was an acceptable addiction, an acceptable disease to be fighting in the public eye. But behind closed doors, he is just like the rest of us, because what do we not tell anyone? What have we done that we don't tell anyone? And I'm not guessing that no one knew, but obviously the public didn't know. So it's kind of like, what do we hold within ourselves because we're ashamed? We feel guilt. We want to protect how others feel about us. So what do we hold in? And Dave held this in. And it's just, it's sad, because as someone that cared about him, you wish that you could have been there to provide that support, to provide that soft place to land for him. Because, we had this great community and still do, but we have this great community that just builds each other up and supports and doesn't judge. And I can only imagine that he felt that this would be too much for the public or even our community to process or to handle. And he may have been concerned about losing the support he did have for what he did reveal, which was still a lot. So I had to call myself onto the carpet, right? I had to stop myself for a second because I was letting my own perception come into play. And it's not about me. It's about Dave. And although there were some complicating heart issues that I'm sure with the combination of those drugs led to his death, it just, takes you off guard. But the fact that he had to hide this, it just shows the pain, right? The amount of pain he must have been in. And obviously, there's the relapse from alcohol, but that happens. That really does happen. And as the public or as his community or as his friend, that would have been okay, right? Hey, he's an alcoholic. You relapse. It happens. You just start over with day one. But then there are these other things. And you really do have to realize that it's not about you. It's like your ego, like I thought, and he presented himself as, but it's not about me. It's about Dave. And I saw this video on Instagram, and it was from the Angels. I'm trying to remember because I saved it, but it was a charitable organization that he worked with very closely for foster children for years and years. And I'm trying to remember, was he on the board? But he did so much work with them. So much work, got the word out there, raised money, gave money. And I just happened to see this week, a video of him that the organization posted. And it was all the times that he spoke about and spoke for this organization. And he did it with such joy and such grace and such humility, and really gave a huge part of himself for that. And that is Dave Hollis. That is the person that is also flawed, but has all these wonderful qualities. Gave all these wonderful things to the world, gave so much good information, gave so much friendship and love, built everyone else up. And he is my friend. He was my friend. And, it's like you often think to yourself that the greats, I'm thinking about Robin Williams right now. The greats, they have given so much of themselves for other people, but their flaw is not giving enough love to themselves. So I just wanted to come on here and acknowledge the information and give my perspective, my human perspective, and to say that this information takes nothing away from the man I knew, my friend, the guy that I had that love for, because he was such an incredible, incredible person with such humor, and he just gave and gave and gave. And I still keep him in my heart and in my prayers, along with his family and friends. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will see you next time on the X Life podcast. Thank you for listening.